A hearing with the FBI's Assistant Director of Counterterrorism. And during this hearing, AOC asked a question that many on the left have been wondering. Are white terrorists being treated differently by the FBI than Muslim terrorists? And do white extremists even get the label of terrorist after they commit serious crimes, including shooting up a black church or shooting up a synagogue? Well, here is AOC's opportunity to ask a member of the FBI, and I love this line of questioning. Take a look.
We've seen white supremacist attacks that were clearly domestic terrorism. Experts, in fact, the acting AG, Jeff Sessions, even called some of these incidents domestic terrorism incidents. The Emmanuel AME Church shooting of Black Americans in Charleston and the Tree of Life synagogue shooting in Pittsburgh of Jewish people, those were only designated and charged as hate crimes, not domestic terrorist incidents. Mr. McGarrity, why did the FBI not believe that these incidents were domestic terrorist incidents?
That's not correct. I don't know who told you that we didn't, but we certainly had cases open on them in both those cases.
But the actual charge, was the actual charge domestic terrorism?
You're not going to find an actual charge of domestic terrorism out there. If you look at Title 18, right? If you're looking for...
Well, it says here that, but at the San Bernardino shooting or the Orlando Pulse nightclub shooting, they were designated and charged as domestic terrorist incidents.
So she's right, and what you're about to hear from Michael McGarrity is a lie, and she calls him out later on Twitter. But look, we've seen this over and over again, and it's just regurgitated in the mainstream media. Like, the mainstream media also exacerbates this issue by immediately referring to one group as terrorists, and it's fine. I mean, if someone carries out these acts of violence, whether they're Muslim or they're white and non-Muslim, it's terrorism. You should call it what it is. But for some reason, there is this double standard where the white perpetrators of very similar crimes do not get the same label and they get prosecuted very differently. But with that said, let's take a look at what McGarrity has to say in response to AOC's questions.
Doesn't it seem that because the perpetrator is Muslim,
that's not correct. That has nothing
that
to do,
the designation would say it's a foreign organization?
It's not correct. That is not correct.
Okay, can you explain why?
So, homegrown violent extremists, most of the people we arrest in the United States, homegrown violent extremists, self-radicalized, born in the US, doesn't matter what religion.
But the Orlando Pulse Club shooter meets those qualifications, and you're implying...
He was worked as an international terrorist. He was following under the definition.
But he was homegrown and self-radicalized.
Extremist cases, how we work homegrown violent extremist cases under the global jihad, we worked under international terrorism. That is correct.
Is white supremacy not a global issue?
It is a global issue.
So why are they not charged with foreign...
Because the United States Congress doesn't have a statute for us for domestic terrorism like we do on a foreign terrorist organization like ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Al-Shabaab.
So in the United States, the KKK is not designated as a terrorist group, even though it is an organized group and they have a very clear message, they have a very clear agenda. And AOC did call McGarrity out on Twitter. She says this hearing was wild, and she also shared a video of the hearing. First, the FBI witness tried to say I was wrong. I tried to be generous and give the benefit of the doubt, but then we checked. I wasn't wrong, okay? Violence by Muslims is routinely treated as terrorism. White supremacist violence isn't. Neo-Nazis are getting off the hook. So someone's calling it what it is, and it's rare. We don't see this often. It's really nice to see someone actually fighting for what's right in Congress. Maytha, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, there's so much here that is political that we have to pull the veil behind to expose it. So in October 2006, the FBI released a bulletin that literally the title is White Supremacist Infiltration of Law Enforcement. Now, subsequently, so many other outlets like The Intercept, even PBS have reported on this story. So the FBI then with DHS goes on to produce a joint assessment that they delivered to Congress about the growing threat of white supremacists in our law enforcement, and even LA Sheriff's Department formed a neo-Nazi gang, right? So in 1991, clear examples. there was so much pushback from the Tea Party that was nascent at this moment, but really growing strong across the nation in terms of their vigor for trying to oppose the Obama administration, that the Secretary of DHS ended up disavowing that report.
That's right.
And so this is where we are, because we didn't take it seriously, and because we were too concerned with pacifying the outrage of right-wing extremists, we decided to not follow through on credible threats. And you know what? White supremacists, Christian fundamentalists, right-wing extremists make up and constitute the majority of domestic homegrown terrorism. And I love that she is pointing that out here and globally. So it should not be disconnected. And I do want to also add that the Obama administration produced allocated money for something called countering violent extremism that was targeted only towards the Muslim community because they were afraid of Muslim community in the US radicalizing themselves. Now, again, how many stories have we heard of that? And most of the stories of quote unquote radicalizing the Muslim community, and I hate that language, have almost always turned up to be cases of entrapment that were for political ends, like Chris Christie running on a case of entrapment to get reelected as governor of New Jersey. So I have a lot to say about this, but we don't have that much time and I don't want to take up too much.
No, go ahead.
Yeah.
Do you have more to say?
I do want to say too that we also, again, terrorism and this idea of terror laws are very politicized. Back in 1927, there was a revolt in Austria. It was a put down of a labor strike and 89 people were killed. That's when the first anti-terror laws were put on the books in a nation state. And that was to suppress any action against the state or that they felt would oppose whatever state action was, or the state in general. So we have to understand what is constituted as terror and what isn't. And law enforcement, being heavily filled with white supremacists, is a part of the state.
Yeah.
I've said it before on here. I think that terrorism has become a word that is
it's like a catch-all word.
Yeah, well, it just means violence perpetrated by Muslims, and it's a political term that is used with the intent to suspend these Muslim alleged criminals' civil liberties. So I think it's, but the thing that I would want to say is that while we have to recognize this double standard, I think that it would be a mistake to now treat, say, quote unquote, white terrorism with the same way we treat Muslim terrorism. We should treat, quote unquote, Muslim terrorism the same way we treat white terrorism. Does that make sense? Like, we shouldn't now suspend the civil liberties of the white terrorists and all that stuff. We shouldn't like throw them in Guantanamo for forever without any charge. All that stuff. Like the things that we do to Muslims routinely, bomb their countries, throw them in Guantanamo, illegal rendition, all that stuff that we do justified in the name of fighting terrorism is a huge problem that we should stop doing.
Right.
We shouldn't expand the net to include other people.
Yeah, definitely. And look, we got to move on, but I agree with you in that, it's important. We've moved so far away from understanding and wanting to protect the civil liberties of humans, right? And because we've seen that happen to the Muslim community, I am certainly not advocating that happens to the white community or any other community. But I do think that if we're going to prosecute individuals under this label of terrorism, you can't do it for one group of people and then simultaneously avoid using that type of prosecution for a different group of people. There is a definition for terrorism. If a white individual falls under that definition based on the actions that they've taken, the violent actions that they've taken, they shouldn't be treated with kid gloves, especially in comparison to how people of color are treated in this country, specifically Muslims.
2 easy ways to follow the Young Turks. One is hit the subscribe button down below. Then you're a TYT subscriber. And second is ring the bell. And when you do that on YouTube, you're notified of our videos.